He came back in with a couple hacksaws.
Oh,
We're live now, yeah?
I might have jumped the gun here. Jesse says 45 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
there was lots of tears.
I bet.
Between this is yeah. Never forget that day.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, it was not my fault, but still.
Yes. But I mean, sad that just have them die to begin with, right? But then,
yeah. And our show horses, so just the time and the money, and they're like your best friends, as you know. They're not really things. They're like proto people, really.
Yes, exactly.
So,
live in 5,
4, 3. You got to count.
Okay, welcome to Hopeifiers. We are in the ancestral, on the lands of the ancestral homes of the Blackfoot people. Hopeifiers, we're glad that you joined us tonight. My co-host Scott Sweetman is here.
Good evening, everyone.
We're going to be having a chat. I think maybe something to do with hope. Is that the plan?
Not economics, but yeah, hope for sure. I hope. Yes. I have the wrong notes if it's anything else, Al.
Yes. So Hopeifiers, going to talk about hope. That only makes sense, right? And so did we have kick us off there, Scott? Well, wait a minute. First of all, you've had, people with COVID in your family.
Yeah.
You're okay.
I'm okay.
You're negative. Yeah. Amazingly.
That's pretty hopeful. And, it really drives home. My mom is one of the people, and she's in not an extended care home. She can get around by herself and take care of herself. And, but she lives in a community home because she was by herself. And it was, yeah. Anyway, COVID broke out, got in, I don't know, into her home. And she didn't test positive for about a week. And then she tested positive. And so that was pretty traumatic. She's about 70. No, I know how old she is. She's 75. And she's in good health otherwise. She smoked most of her life. So she's got, a little bit of that going on. But other than that, she's, lean and mean and trim, walks 5-6 miles a day, pretty good shape. But luckily, she hasn't gotten any symptoms. She keeps testing positive, but she's had both of her vaccinations. And, I know there's a lot of people that don't want to take the vaccine, and they have their own reasons. And, some of those people are dear friends of mine, and, I respect choice, but, there's a whole big question there. We'll be talking a little bit about that, I think, today. But I know in my mom's case, and also in other family members, and, in my case, where I've been in contact with people that are positive, I've been vaccinated. It seems like firsthand, don't want to get in an argument with anyone, don't flame me, but the people that have been vaccinated and are in contact with people that have become positive are doing okay. And I do have to say that both of the people that have tested positive were vaccinated, but have shown none or very little symptoms. Okay, so again, I don't want to get into the whole argument, but firsthand knowledge, both people double vaccinated did indeed contract COVID or testing positive, both on the short test and the long test. Because I don't know if
2 tests.
Yeah, and I don't know if people know that, because if you take a rapid test, and I've seen a lot of stuff online, rapid test is a joke, doesn't work. You're right, it's not 100% positive. So if you're getting a rapid test, they do 2 tests, and so they do the first one as a rapid test, and if it comes back positive, they assume it's correct. But if it comes back negative, they don't tell you the answer, which is silly because it's easy to look up online. So if they send you a message saying your results will be delayed, they're doing the second test to prove that you're negative. Okay. So in both of those cases, So I've seen it 3 ways. I've seen it where the rapid test is positive and then the later test comes back positive. And I've seen it where the first test is negative and the last test comes back negative. So
long and the short of it, you've had a real up close and personal experience with COVID. And in your case, hallelujah, very, very mild symptoms, like mild to no No, mild would be a right way to say it. Mild symptoms, right?
Yeah,
So
my
good.
mother
Excellent.
she had a little trouble breathing in the beginning. Not, no, she sounded like she was huffing a little bit, but that could have been stress. She got really scared. And I think that that's something we need to remember is that, it used to be like cancer. My mom said cancer. My father, my grandmother passed away of cancer. And it used to be when somebody had cancer, the first word that came in all of our minds was they're going to die. Let's be honest. But nowadays, that's not true. And most people that are diagnosed with cancer don't actually die from cancer. Most of them die from old age or other things. So the same with COVID, and I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes from. Is if my mother were to pass away from a heart attack, now did she? Mom, I'm not wishing this on you. I know you're healthy. God bless. But would she be marked down as a COVID death or a heart attack, or I don't know. Bottom line is, like you said, she got her vaccinations. She did get COVID and she's okay.
Yeah, cool.
Right?
I think in terms of relating it back to hope,
yeah.
I think that, people who have vaccinations, have been vaccinated, I think they have a hope for a better future, a more, a healthier future, and that if they contract COVID, which we know can happen, that the results are going to be mild, right? And for those that choose the unvaccinated one, like if we hope that's your experience, that you have mild, but the data is more so that there's a potential for them to have more severe experiences.
Yeah.
Right?
And like you said, first-hand results, 2 people double vaxxed and they're positive, but okay. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let us get more directly to the topic of hope, my friend.
Yeah. So today I thought it'd be interesting to talk about what we have to be hopeful for in 2021. Because if you turn on the news and you are involved in social media or stuff there, it can get pretty dark, right? Death sells is the old media mantra, right? If it bleeds, it leads. And it's true. People tend to tune in when there's been a disaster or bad news, and we often overlook the things we have to be hopeful for. And I think that that's part of the impetus behind this show, is to remind people that every day, every way, we've got things to be hopeful for. You just have to, acknowledge that they're there and then use the power of hope to help you be better at, dealing with all the other stuff. So I think that's what motivated our topic today, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah. You bet.
And we're going to look at some things. And I did a bunch of research and I looked at reasons to be hopeful in 2021. And there's some weird answers. I was surprised. And there's some that I thought of, and then there's some that I didn't think of, but yeah, they are certainly reasons to be hopeful. So I thought I'd throw those out to you for your comment, see what you think, what your opinion is, whether you agree that they're a hopeful or a noteful. Okay.
Let's chat about it. Hey, you know what else? When you were saying about all the bad news and when you watch the news and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've heard this before and it makes sense to me that our basic defense type system means that we look for threat, right? And if we're safe, we're safe, and that's our best environment that we can be in is when we're safe. But that bad things kind of stick to us like Velcro, whereas positive things kind of slip right off like Teflon. There's a kind of a propensity that way. So knowing that propensity, that let's up our game on the positive things and try and minimize the pain and suffering. So
that's true. Our lizard brain is designed to store those dangers and to make them larger in life in our head, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
Good point. Great point. Okay, so since we talked about vaccine, and this, some people may not agree with this, but I think this is a really strong point, and it's got applications beyond what we're talking about. And that's when we started out on the whole vaccine. Before we had the vaccine, the big hope was that we would have vaccines in approximately, they were talking about 18 months. Do you remember that? They were on the news. They were saying,
yes.
We can't get it done any faster than 18 months. That's the minimum. We're probably looking at longer than that. And we actually got 2, eventually 3 out in less than a year.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. Hey, incredible.
Yeah, that is incredible. And okay, there's been questions about, well, was it tested enough? Was it this or that or whatever? But a lot of the things that they learned during that process at a scientific level, go out there, have a look. I'm not going to go into them because it would take the whole
Breakthroughs,
show.
right? It's like
Yeah.
breakthrough type
Yeah,
stuff, right?
exactly. And new ways of collaboration. That's one of the big things, is that, the world scientists really all turned their efforts in one direction, and the result was amazing. And it's the first time really that we've seen that in modern history, and it gives us a lot of hope that in the future that science will be more collaborative, that it'll be more innovative, and that it'll be looking at different ways to do what it does and come up with better medicines. Because I'm sure, as you know, the tried and true antibiotics that we've relied on for the last few decades, a lot of things are becoming immune to them. When I was in coma, when I woke up, I got MRSA, superbug, right? A bacteria that wasn't affected by our usual, penicillin sulfa drug cocktail mix.
Right.
So the idea that we're going to need a whole bunch of new medicines to combat these new super diseases, as they're called, is scary. But then we also now, because of the challenges of a pandemic, a global pandemic, we've come up with some new answers, new ways to do things. So I think that's a hopeful thing. What do you think?
I agree. And I mean, you think about it too. If you, the relationships that were formed, Sarah in Canada was talking to Ivan in Australia, and like they have a relationship now, right? Are they going to share more? Are they going to collaborate more? Of course they are, right? So I think that's a very, very positive, a very positive thing. One, that it happened so quick. Two, that huge, collaboration type cooperation approach, right? How about if we do more collaboration and cooperation and less competition, right? How about that? That would be something, wouldn't it?
Well, it stripped out some of the old system of, meeting at a conference and the whole social, time, energy, money spent on building up those relationships, and really streamlined that to where people said, okay, we can be friends later, but let's collaborate. I know your name, you know my name. Let's just get on this and work on it, right? Yeah. So it has streamlined that process, and that's a good thing.
Very much so. Yeah.
People.
That's a reason for hope. Number one. Well said, Mr. Sweetman.
I think we both agree. That's a hope one. So here's another one. This one I had to mull this one around a little bit. And it's that Silicon Valley is getting a wake-up call. And can you see how Silicon Valley and the whole situation in the last 2 years may have generated something that's hopeful?
I think I need more. No, tell me more.
Okay. So in the past, our economy has been hugely driven by financial institutions, right? Banking, bonds, all of those things were really the basis of our economy and the move forward. And then even when technology was presented, it was really in terms of, what's its opening price going to be? What's its, market value going to be? It was still breaking it down to a financial worth. But what we've seen over the last 2 years is that tech companies and technology are becoming more and more valued for the impact they can have on issues like health and society and the gains that it gives us in those ways, rather than just monetary values. So instead of technology simply being a financial instrument, it's become much more a social, a global mechanism for growth and change. And so that we, look at what had to step up, right? We couldn't meet corporations. No one can meet in public because of COVID, right? So FaceTime, Apple used to run SafeTime, right? And you and I both know, both Apple kind of people, but it was iffy at best, right? And because of the whole COVID thing, we've seen communication programs come out and platforms come out supercharged, like Zoom and many others. And a lot of them are free or are very inexpensive. And really, they've helped revolutionize the way we do business, the way we communicate with each other. And people are really valuing not just what they can bring in terms of, their IOPs or their, net value, but what the benefit is. Their secondary benefit has become more of a primary focus. So when I looked at this, it was people in finance that were saying, yeah, what we've learned is that there's value in really what these things can do for society, not just what we can sell their stock for. And a better awareness that investing in these companies and these innovations as a tool for growth and change, which then provide financial gain, not just as a primary tool for financial gain.
Okay, so sort of like if I'm following, like where Silicon Valley has rediscovered their why. Why are they doing this? Is it just to make money? No, it's to make, connectivity between people. It's to, bridge, these differences that we have and connect, right? Yeah, I think
it is. And the other side of that is not only has Silicon Valley woken up, is that financial organizations and backers and investors have woken up to that fact too.
Right. Yeah.
And so the article that I was reading on this said that there's a lot of hope in 2021 that more innovation, smaller, not just the Amazons or the Apples, are going to see more investment, because investors will be looking for those opportunities that are, going to be there when the next challenges come and we face them. So I think it's an awareness thing. And I think that provides hope to startups and people with dreams and, hey, I've got an idea how we can do this better, or the problem doesn't exist yet, but here's a solution, those kind of things, right?
Mm-hmm. So is this if this is on your list, we'll defer till later, but also related to this is the more employers being more amenable for offsite type work, right? For people working. Is that on the list later on?
Oh yeah, keep going. I'll just move down to that one. Keep going.
Yeah, that is a huge advantage in terms of if employers now understand or appreciate that in at least most cases, if not all, employees who are good employees, it doesn't matter where they're working, they're going to get the work done, right? So then if they have the option to work from home, and if you're a mom and you can, do your work and breastfeed your baby and then go back and do your work, and that's awesome, right? So the more flexibility, the more kind of human, what would you call it, life affirming that type of experience can be, I think is super. Like that's a very, very big positive, right? That you look at things, how can this better serve the people who they need the income, of course, but also to make their life as enjoyable as possible in providing the value or doing the work that they do for others. So
it does. And that's really interesting because it is on the list, and how it comes up on the list is that cubicle culture has been identified as being, a cancer for a long time. That, this is my workspace. I've got this little tiny box that I go into, and, I commute for an hour each way. I sit in this little box that's disconnected from everyone around me. And, I'm a number, et cetera, et cetera. And we've identified that there's a lot of problems with that cubicle culture, but there's been no way to kill it off. There's been nothing to replace it. Right. And so companies weren't willing to take that risk. They weren't willing to make that first jump outside of a few, and there's been good successes in companies that have tried, and, they've published the information, but there hasn't really been a wholesale buy-in of changing the way we do business. We're still back in the post-Victorian era of the cubicle culture. Right. So the pandemic gave us no choice but to reevaluate those things, and that now we're seeing the value in alternative work, either blended, where people are, coming to office for a few days a week if they still need that connection to the office space, but more often than not, being able to work from alternative environments that they themselves have created. So I think that we have hope that we now have the willpower and the corporate impetus to do away with cubicle culture and see what comes next. It's still gelatinous out there in terms of what it's going to be. And I know a lot of top executives that I'm friends with or talk to are in transition now. Their organizations don't really know what they're going to go with headed forward. But they know that it's not going to be like the past, because as you correctly said, the proof is in the pudding. Everyone was working from home and the world didn't end. Companies still made money. Things still went forward. Classes got taught. People did what people do. And that's got a knock-on effect for the environment. And we're going to talk about the environment as one of the things. Sure. But just think of the lower commuting cost on our system, right?
Definitely. No question. I mean, I know in my case, pre-COVID, I was 4,000 kilometers a month, roughly, is what I would drive, right? Maybe more. So that's really 40 hours of time in the car, right? So not only the resources of driving around and the tire wear and blah, 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 all those kind of things, but my time, 40 hours of my time sitting is horrible, right?
Yeah.
Through COVID, I've found that standing to do COVID meetings, man, it's been super, super good for my health, my strength, my endurance, just standing. And so I found that sitting, I'm not a fan of sitting anymore. And part of that is I really love driving, but I just can't sit as much as I used to and don't wanna. So
well, and your health is proof. We're talking about firsthand proof. Anyone who knows you can say that COVID has been like the best health benefit to Al Friesen ever. Like, you're in the best shape. Probably Corolla knew you at a time, maybe when you were a little younger and in better shape. I don't know, but
actually she didn't. I've never been as good a shape as I am right now. Never.
Fantastic. That's great. Yeah. Not just physically, but mentally, right? So there's some proof in that pudding. But going back to it is definitely hope that the cubicle culture, the 70s, 80s, 90s, 50s, 60s, 40s has ended. There's no question that it's ended. There's no impetus for companies to go back to that. That it's been proven that it works. It's a benefit to, single parent families. It's a benefit to part-time workers. It's a benefit to our environment in terms of transportation. I read an economic paper. Now, it was written by a turn of the century socialist, I think, or a Marxist. So some people, me included, maybe not agree with the philosophy behind it, but they were saying that if people would take jobs that were no more than 3 blocks away from them, right? Because what happens now is, so a pharmacist, let's say, lives on the west side, but he works on the south side, and a pharmacist from the south side works on the west side. If they would simply change jobs, the same job, right? But they wouldn't have to drive. They could walk to work. Their health would benefit. The environment would benefit. And it worked out how, if we did that across the board, just made everyone work within, 3-4 blocks or at their closest destination to whatever it is they did, what a huge economic and, ecological boost that would be for our civilization.
True.
And so this is kind of an alternative to that. We don't have to, have the government force us to work close to home. We can do it in our own way. And I really think that this is a big one. Yeah?
Yep. Good one.
So more hope there for us.
More hope. Love it. The
So
hope meter, Scott, the hope meter is going up.
Nice. We're there. Okay. Countries are re-entering climate accords. There were big companies, talking about the environment. The US, for example, is re-entering the Paris Climate Accord. Some of the goals, I would say, are unrealistic. And, I'm an Albertan kind of kid, grew up with pump jacks all around our farms and ranches. So I wouldn't say I'm pro fossil fuel, but, there's a place for it, certainly in today's economy. But there's better ways to manage it. And there's always better ways to do it and make it better, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that we're seeing that a bonus is that because of the cost of COVID, because of the way it's changed our economy, this changed our behavior, that there's more interest in the environment and making it better for us around us.
I don't know how much the technology has improved, but if you think of Elon Musk and SpaceX, right?
Oh, that's on our list.
Okay,
You're
all right.
jumping on me ahead again.
Oh, okay.
Go
Sorry.
ahead. Go ahead.
But
No,
if
go
you
ahead.
relate that to oil, what I don't know how they extract, if the oil extraction process is much different than it was in like 1926, right? They have the hydraulic things that tighten the drill stem, whereas before they had the chains that you had to spin them and had to have chains whipping all over, right? So it's safer, but I don't think the technology has really changed much, right?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't that much. And I like I said, I grew up in central Alberta, and I know that actually some of the people I grew up with, their families were some of the first families that developed fracking.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, they weren't the originators of fracking, but certainly some of the processes that have become in use worldwide. And there's been a lot of negative things about fracking, and from what I know about it, it doesn't sound like something that I'd really like done underneath my land, or anywhere near the water I drink, or those things. But the point is that all of those companies now are looking at new ways of doing things and getting around. Because we're looking at, we've entered time. China just announced they're not going to be exporting coal. As you said, people are going to be commuting less. I know that a lot of people are saying, and this is something that's coming up in Lethbridge, is mass transit. How do we because we started looking at mass transit, right, with the pandemic. How do we make it safe? How do we make it more viable? How do we make it a better experience for people, right? So I think that whole issue on being more aware of our environment and the climate is something that has come out on the side of hopeful because of what we've undergone recently.
Well, wasn't it like early on, like I'm talking 6 months in or something, like where, communities in China that hadn't seen the sky for, 10 decades, or not 10 decades, but for a decade,
a long time.
All of a sudden they see blue sky, like, it's just, and in like Venice, where the pollution in the waterways was horrendous, and like it's clearing up, right? That kind of thing, or it did, or yeah.
Well, airplanes, cruise ships, daily commuting, all of those things have definitely impacted the carbon dump, daily carbon dump, hourly carbon dump that we see going on. And I don't think that anyone argues that that's good. There's arguments about how serious that is, or about how dangerous it is. But I haven't met anyone that's saying, "Oh, it's great for the environment to dump all of that carbon dioxide in there." So I think
know for people who are really, there's people, of course, who are very sensitive to it, and it is a neurotoxin, right? Exhaust fumes are a neurotoxin. It gets even in the grass on the ditches, right? Collects it from the vehicles, and then if you're very sensitive to it, like, I mean, you can get very sick just walking through the ditch, right? If in fact that's so. Well,
in Japan, our building, one of our school buildings, were white, and we used to have to go out there and scrub off the carbon. And when we first went there, we just went out with a brush and scrubbed it off, right, because it would get this black film on it. But always felt sick afterwards. It wouldn't get into your lungs, but you'd get in contact with it. And of course, you wore rubber gloves. And then we found out that the normal way is you have to hire these guys who come out in hazmat suits and big pressure washers, and they hang up sheets so that it's contained, and it's just pretty toxic stuff, right?
So let's talk about young Scott and gasoline and such like this. Did you ever siphon gasoline out of a tank and get a big mouthful of gas?
Yeah, of course I did.
Of course I did. I did too. Yes. So I don't know what that did to our brains, but probably wasn't good. I doubt. But
well, and I've never really met a farm kid who doesn't like the smell of diesel, like a diesel tractor or something. I don't know why. If you're a city kid, you probably have never smelled diesel smoke on a clear morning. But there's something about it just smells good.
It's not as nice as gunpowder fire.
No, it's not. But
not as nice as that. But it's quite nice. Very
not
pleasant
for the environment, though. Yeah.
No.
But I do remember, this is funny. Like I said, I grew up in central Alberta. Is that at night the sound of pump jacks would put me to sleep. That.
Oh yeah, nice.
Because I think around our ranch, I don't know, we must have had 20 or 30 of the things. And in the winter, you can hear them quite clearly, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so it was almost
the sound travels so good on in the cold or something, I guess.
Yeah, and it was sort of, and I'm sure there's environmentalists that are just freaking out, but it was almost like a symphony of as these pump jacks would do their thing. But
Nice.
yeah, so anyway,
those sound effects are all included with this show. No extra charge, folks.
and you can reuse them. I give freely my public comments. Help yourself to
Nice.
Scott's pump jack noises.
Exactly. That's right. No patent on that, baby. You go ahead and use it.
None at all. So yeah, whatever your take on it is, I think that there's definitely hope for a greener existence coming out of what we've been through. Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
This is one on the list, and this has very little to do with the pandemic, sort of, but it has a lot to do with a lot of the social unrest and things that were going on, which is the pandemic sort of overtook that really, really quickly. Right. And that's talking about how cities are looking at policing. And, there's that whole defund the police thing, which personally I think is crazy, but I think that there's an underlying message there that people wanted to change, and change has occurred. And a lot of big cities have been not talking about defunding the police per se, but really looking at how they go about protecting their communities and providing what their communities need. And one thing that's really come out of that is some big cities, Oakland, California, Albuquerque, New Mexico, San Francisco, are all looking at ways that they can better utilize their first responders and their emergency teams. So when there's a drug overdose, when there's those type of emergencies, in the past, they would roll men with guns. The first people on scene were the police. And, I've talked to lots of police officers. They're not equipped to deal with that. If somebody's laying there overdosing, they've got Narcan with them usually, but beyond that, that's not really their bailiwick, right? So then the EMTs have to roll behind them, and the police have to clear it, and then the EMTs go in, and the opportunities for problems or mistakes are really, really high. And you look at law enforcement and their interaction with people that are suffering from drug addiction or drug overdose or mental health issues is very confrontational. Usually the police only get involved when there's a danger, right? Mm-hmm. So, if you're a police officer or law enforcement agent and you're rolling up on the scene, your historical memory, your body, everything is getting ready for a confrontation, right? Because that's the normal situation that you're going to face. Sure. And you want to go home to your kids and your wife, and sure, you want to help out, and I believe that, law enforcement are some of the finest people we have. But they're human. They suffer from stress and all of these.
They're doing incredibly hard work. The things they have to see, right? The stories they have to hear, that's like brutally hard stuff that they have to do. So, yeah. So very grateful that there's people men and women who put themselves in harm's way to do that work.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example, and this is the point. I had a cousin who was undercover narcotics squad in Vancouver, and we were out riding horses one day, and he was telling me, he said, and he quit quite young. He left the force and retired very early, and after I think like 12 or 14 years on narco undercover. And he said the hardest thing is that every time they would get to roll, they'd be all stacked up outside the door, and when that door opened, they never knew what was going to be on the inside. Was it going to be a shotgun? Was it going to be dead kids? Was it going to be, they never, ever knew. And so that moment for them was like a moment of extreme fear, horror, preparation. Can I get to my gun before, they kill me or one of my partners, or, all of the things that go through your head. And it's really quite horrific. Most of us open doors and never even think of what's on the other side. Nope. And these people continually are in that position. But then you look at EMTs, and I've had good friends that become EMTs, And, when they roll to a call like that, they start going through a mental checklist. Okay, are they breathing? What have they taken? Do they have a history of abuse? Is their body used to this? Is this something that, there's a whole different mindset that's going on because they're used to dealing with a whole different situation. Now, I understand that sometimes, obviously police protection is required and is needed. But what these cities are finding when they look back at their cases and do their reviews is that in many cases, an EMT with the mindset that they're there to save a life and, deal with the legal aspect of it after everyone's taken care of is a better way to go. So these cities are saying, instead of automatically rolling law enforcement, let's leave them for, the things that absolutely for sure we know we need them for, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll roll EMTs or specially trained, that are some of the cities are looking at sort of an in-between EMT law enforcement officer. They're really looking at new ways to deal with policing. And I think that's a really hopeful thing.
Well, the other thing that makes me think of too, Scott, is, let's say there's little people in that house, right?
Yeah.
And you've got an EMT or people who aren't like big guys with guns kind of a thing coming in a more gentle way to kind of help in the situation, right? That's got to be less traumatic for that little person, right?
Well, and that's not to say that there's not very compassionate or small or whatever police at all. And I know that's not what you're saying.
No.
But I really think of, I got pulled over once in a back road when I was in college in West Virginia. We'd gone across the state line into Ohio, bought some beers at the gas station. This is on my list of stupid things to do. They asked me to drive because I'd only had one beer. And so I said, okay, I was driving some back road, got pulled over. Police stopped us. Being a kid from Alberta, I knew all the police there. So automatically I jumped out of the car and started to walk back to the police cruiser, which was met with me getting bounced off the back of the car and the gravel and me in my back, gun to the back of my head. And once we all calmed down and went back to the station and talked it over, and luckily I had a letter from my mother in my pocket. So they understood that I wasn't from there. And I explained my situation and they said, you're really lucky because here, when somebody does that, it's 100% a sign of aggression. And, we're on that road, the trooper that pulled you over, there was multiple people in the car. The driver jumped out and started, coming back towards our vehicle. We don't know if you're armed. We don't know what's happening. The officer in that situation would have been justified to take more aggressive action than he did. You're really lucky that you didn't get shot. And it really drew home to me that, of course, after I got home and thought about it and, was scared that, boy, that would have been really unfair to that officer. He pulls over a car with 5 people in it, on a back road. It's really dark. One person does something really erratic. He's by himself. The other people in the car fidgeting around, acting really strange, probably just trying to hide beer bottles under the seats. But, to the officer in the cruiser behind, all of that equals, am I going to get to go home and see my kids tonight? Mm-hmm. And so I think that mentality, that reality, let's call it a reality, right? The reality that they face may not put them in a situation, and it's resources, right? People talk about resources. And often I think that law enforcement are put into situations that they may not be the best people for. Yes, they'll come up with a solution because they're trained to find solutions, but they may not be the best people. And I think cities are looking at, according to the research that I found, there's a lot of big cities looking at, not saying, oh, our police are bad, but they're saying maybe our system isn't optimized. Maybe it's an old way of thinking. And maybe we have other professionals that could be responding to these types of situations. Domestics, for example, there's different levels of domestics. And some cities, any sort of domestic issue, law enforcement's rolled. And, in some cases that's absolutely warranted and that's what's needed. But they're looking at and saying, is that warranted in all cases?
Mm-hmm. I know that certainly in some parts of the country, some parts of the world, let's put it that way, law enforcement is increases fear doesn't increase feelings of safety, right?
Right.
And like I think here, our law enforcement officers increase our feeling of safety in our community, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that to be the case. But
Me
the
too.
more they can do that, increase feelings of safety in our community, the better off we all are, right? That's the reality of it.
Well, and it has to be said, and I know that you brought this up in other episodes. We're a couple of middle-aged, middle-income white guys, right? So our experience with things is pretty one-sided. You know, I know that when I was in the southern U.S., the experience of Caucasians was very different than the experience of African Americans generally. So there's a lot of issues here, but the hope point, the thing I hope, see what I did there?
Nice.
The hope that I hope everyone will take away from this message of hope is that cities and organizations are looking at the best way and not just saying we've always done it this way, we're going to keep doing it this way. And it's not about judging the police and saying you're bad, so we're going to replace you. They're saying, are we putting you in situations that there's really no win-win for you? And I think that that's really, really positive. And then they're looking at, sorry.
Oh, I'm just going to add in, and then also, as you identified, with your experience in the southern states, and your experience quite different than any Black colleagues that you might have had there.
Absolutely,
thing, right?
Yeah.
That like zero, like this should be like a worldwide law enforcement rule, zero racism, right? Like this is, these are the citizens that you are protecting, right? So like, if you think about, I was chatting with a indigenous woman here in town, and she was talking about her 15-year-old daughter, and she wouldn't let her daughter go to the mall for fear of being, abducted, human trafficked, that kind of thing. I understand, like I don't understand it. Like I wouldn't have any concerns about my daughter, but I understand, well, that shouldn't be the case, right? Her safety level in the community should be the same as mine, right? And that the system is going to look out for her daughter as well as it's looking out for my daughter, right?
Yeah. Agreed. And I think that they do. I think in general that they do. And I think that really what's coming out of this is just reevaluating and looking at openly who are the best people to solve the problem in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm.
Or is there alternate training that we genuinely need to help these people do their job? Oh, I lost you.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, man. My screen went blank for a second.
Oh, okay.
So I think that that's a good whole point. Let's move on from that because we got a few other good ones. This one you'll really like. I don't know what time we have. I didn't start a timer, but telehealth is now becoming mainstream.
Yes. Good news. Yeah.
You probably can talk to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you know, Scott, my day job is about, solutions to help employers keep them and their teams healthy is my day job. And I think that any access that makes it, or any type of a service that makes it easier to access for the people that need that care, more convenient for them, more reliable for them, I think that's awesome, right? So that's great news. So if we can do that, I'm a big fan of it. I've used it. I thought it worked really well. And you talk to it depending on the service. Sometimes you're talking to a doctor. Sometimes you're talking to an LPN. So basically I think it's awesome to increase access to service, right? Same as, Scott, you probably know this, there's this integrated care access model in Lethbridge that are teaching Lethbridgians about the system navigator training, right? So that people in our community have a better understanding of how you access resources in our community, so that we see somebody who has a need and we say, hey, I think I know a resource that might help you. If you wish, I can try and connect you with this resource, right? That kind of a thing. So I think it's anything to take the barriers off people getting the help they need is a good thing.
Yeah, my pituitary gland problem was damaged when I had coma. Yes. I have two doctors, endocrinologists, and the other one is some kind of neurologist, ladies in Edmonton. They met me when I was unconscious in the hospital in Edmonton. I've never met them. I've talked to them over the phone a number of times. We've telehealth linked regularly. They have solved my problem. They're still working on other stuff. Never met them, right?
Awesome. That's amazing.
Fantastic. Yep. So, and that's becoming the norm. And I think that's an exceptional thing.
Yes.
Right.
Great news.
And I talked to a doctor friend. He said the same thing, because they only want to see people they need to see. Their schedules are overbooked. They're
Oh,
really overbooked.
and they being the medical professionals, they don't have the exposure of somebody who has a virus or a cold, or right. They can protect themselves from that exposure, keep themselves safe. So it's a win-win all the way around.
Exactly. So how much time do we have for one more or two more?
Two more. Sorry, I just got to adjust my little mat here. I must have been moving around too much.
Well, hey. I'm gonna throw you a bone here, and I'm gonna talk about the space economy, because this is a big one. Space economy is blasting off, right?
Oh, look at you go, Scott Sweetman.
They're saying everything's pointing to 2021 of being a banner super year for global space economy. You want to talk about that, your hero?
Sure. Well, I don't follow anything much more that Elon Musk does. I just know that he transformed an industry. He's transformed space travel by making reusable rockets. Why did it take people 50 years to figure that out? Was it 50 years? Yes, it was 50 years. Like that's amazing. And that he made such a significant difference there. It's incredible, I think. So, yeah.
Well, and Elon Musk is also building a system of satellites that's going to allow interconnectivity around the globe. So basically, everyone everywhere is going to be able to connect, and that's fantastic, right?
It is.
But it's not just the private sector. NASA is going to be landing a helicopter on Mars, I think, this year. I'm not a space junkie, but I do have it tagged on my Google announcement, so I get quite a bit.
A helicopter.
Yeah.
A helicopter. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know the details, but this is something to go look up. So because I don't understand in low air environments or no air environments how things like that work, but apparently NASA's working on a helicopter for Mars. Boeing is looking at the design stations of a Starliner aircraft. Okay. So we're getting to the point that not just trillionaires can take a little holiday in space. We might be a generation or two away, but we've broken that barrier. We've broken that glass ceiling, as it will. And I'm not taking away from other glass ceilings that still remain unbroken. But it's pretty clear that this one has been broken, and we've got a lot of hope heading into it. No, we don't quite have jet cars in every home like they used to think we would have by 2021, but we're getting closer. We're getting closer. So, so if you're a space junkie, that is the place to go.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm saving the last one for you, and I'm a rancher son, so this is I maybe have a little different view than you about this, but
okay. Well, wait a minute. What is it you're reading from first of all? What is this list? Where's this from?
My notes. It's from all over.
All over. Okay, let's hear it. I don't know about this setup. What are you telling me here, buddy? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. North America is going meatless.
Yes. Oh yeah, it's happening, baby.
Yeah,
it's not. I don't know what the world population that is vegan or vegetarian is, but it's going up for sure, no question. And it's something like I think people should consider trying, at least just try it and see if it has, like, there's a lot of reasons why you might try it. One is for your health. Mm-hmm. And in my case, this, Scott, I've told this many times. I watched that show Forks Over Knives, and then was so amazed at the research and the linkage between animal protein and disease, and a variety of different diseases, and how the Esselstyn, Dr. Esselstyn, could, with mice, turn cancer on and turn it off. Turn it on, turn it off, just by varying the protein, the animal protein in the diet. So that was incredible. And then, but I thought, ooh, a vegan looks like somebody who's like, 80 pounds, and he's gonna, he's very frail. And I this didn't make sense. I didn't want to be this. And then there's this guy, Rip Esselstyn, and that's Esselstyn, the guy who's the researcher did the China study. Rip Esselstyn, his son, is like 6'4", 250-pound, like marathoner, firefighter, very, very physically strong. And then he had a way to say, hey, you want to try doing a vegan thing? here's my 30-day trial, right? And I tried it for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, I felt considerably better.
Did you get big guns, Al? Did you
But things like inflammation are very much tied to animal protein consumption. So, and what is inflammation impact? Arthritis, joint problems in general, right? Arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, like heart conditions that are all impacted by inflammation, right? And so dial back the meat or the animal protein, and that's that. So that's a health reason, right?
Yeah.
Environmental reason, then it's like huge. Like there's for every, I'm gonna butcher these numbers, but it's gonna be close. For every pound of meat that you produce, to process it takes like 150 gallons of water, or something like that. So a huge draw on water as a resource. And it takes like 10 pounds of grain of food supply in a plant food supply to produce 1 pound of a meat food supply. So if you're thinking about feeding everybody in the world, well, all of a sudden you can multiply your food supply by 10, right? Like now you got 10 pounds of barley, grain, whatever it is that humans can thrive on, and instead of 1 pound of meat. So it's huge that way. And then I know that you have a passion for animals, Scott. You love your dogs. You love your dogs.
I love cows too. Yeah.
You love cows too. Yeah. You know, you would never. So, you know, that if you're worried about the suffering of other sentient beings, then you don't, in my case, nothing has to die for me to live. So that kind of has a feel good type value to it. So
absolutely.
And now, you know what? And I think there's huge profits to be made. A&W has this Beyond Meat burger, right? So it's a plant-based protein burger. And Southern Alberta is going to be a huge corridor for plant protein production, right? Huge, like with beans and lentils and that kind of stuff here. Anyways, Beyond Meat burger, you can buy the Mama burger, big old slab of meat for $2.50. You buy the Beyond Meat burger, it's $7.80 for like. So A&W's going cha-ching, and I'm the guy who's paying it. So like I can't bitch. I pay it. Yeah. But yeah, there's people, and I'm not saying Beyond Meat burgers are good for your health. It's a way to have a burger that's all juicy and anyways, they taste great. But I should have had a salad, probably would have been smarter. But yes.
But and I just want to say on the other side, you know, like I said, I grew up in beef country. I herded cattle for years as a kid, and there is no cattleman that I've ever met, no rancher I've ever met that wants to herd animals. None, zero. They make their living. Usually it's a family business. They've been generations caring for animals, caring for the land. No one cares more about the land they're on than the cattlemen or the farmers who are there. No one cares more about the animals that they produce than the people who raise them and produce them. Okay. What needs to happen is that those people, their livelihoods, their traditions need to be taken into account. And I think that that's where a lot of hope is coming from, because animal protein doesn't need to be eradicated from our diets. It certainly needs to be reduced. I mean, if you look at some of the healthiest diets in the world, Mediterranean diet, the Japanese diet, they do include red meat, but in reduced amounts in compared to the plant protein and plant material in the diets, and fish and seafood and those other things. So the hope for me from a long generation, I'm looking at my cowboy hat and spurs, which hang sort of behind my desk, is, sorry, Grandpa, is that Dad, Uncle, they're all there, is I really think that there's opportunities for cattle producers who, and 98% of them are really anything that will make what they do better for the environment, for the cattle, they're interested in. Now they need to make a living too. And it's not like most of these people, most of your small ranchers and cattlemen basically are subsistence farming. They're hardly making enough money. They're not like on TV, these giant cattle barons that fly everywhere in helicopters. And, you know, that's really unrealistic from what I know firsthand.
But Scott, they have land, and that land can grow 1,000 different crops, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're if the consumers are shifting their preferences for whatever reason, whether it's health, whether it's environmental consideration, whether it's compassionate type reasons, then they could just shift their crops. They grow different crops, and the demand is going to be there, right? That's the demand is growing. So,
or in other countries like Japan, where Wagyu beef, for example, the cattle are babied, or we've seen it in North America even, where almost the boutiquing of cattle production, where the cattle are now of course the price goes up by 100%, but if you're only eating it 10 times a year instead of for every meal. I remember having steak for breakfast because there was always beef in our freezer, right? I mean, that was poor food for us. If going into town and buying fish, it was like a Christmas dish, right? Because unless it was lake trout or pike or something. But so I think there's lots of opportunities, and the really the hopeful part of this for me is that people are starting to come together, and there's been a lot of push from all directions, and it's become a little less confrontational in the last few years and more about cooperation. And that's really the key. Anytime you attack somebody in their livelihood and their traditions and their culture and say, no, you're bad, you're going to get pushback. That's in any situation. So, if you show up at a ranch and you say you're bad people, you're ruining the land, you're hurting these poor animals, you're not going to get a good reception, because I can tell you,
as you said, these are like stewards of the land, carers of the animals, so that they get, the minimum stress in their life. Have you ever watched that Temple Grandin?
No.
Okay, she says she's on the spectrum, but she's brilliant. Well, I shouldn't say but. She's on the spectrum and she's brilliant, and she basically sees what cattle sees. So she's designed all these cattle chutes that are super safe for the animals, and the animals like feel comfortable moving in them, right? The animals don't bunch up or get scared or anything. They know how to move, and it's just because that's how she sees the world, as like and then she designs it, and they're like way better than what existed prior because of her just unique perspective on the world, kind of a thing, right?
Well, part of the problem is processing, like you say. Some of the as a rancher, I worked in a meat processing plant to help pay for my first degree in university, and it was horrendous, to be honest. I'd never seen horrors like that in my entire life, and I'd grown up around cattle. I'd put down and butchered pet cattle, and there was nothing mean or horrible. It was done with reverence and respect and no pain, but what's driving that is the buyer. And let's put the blame where it belongs, right? If you want your 99-cent hamburger, then there has to be corners cut somewhere, right?
I see what you're saying. Okay.
And so it's like you're willing to pay for the $7 hamburger. Well, somebody will produce it, right?
Yep.
But if that all non-meat hamburger was only viable at $1, not many people would get into that business.
No, for sure,
right?
not.
And so that's always been the argument with beef producers, especially pork. As long as you want dirt cheap meat, well, corners have to be cut. I mean, production has to be automized. It's like Ford, when they built the cars. And so I think a lot of it comes down to consumers and saying, okay, we want these things and we're willing to pay for them. Now it means that we're only going to eat beef or pork 1 in every 5 meals instead of 2 times a day. Economically, that's all we can afford. But then that allows the producers to have smaller herds. It allows them to, back off on the growth hormones and a lot of the things causing the problems. Also allows the producers to be more humane, to be less hurried and rushed, to have better trained, better facilities. So I think ultimately it comes down to what the consumers is like oil and gas, right? You can't have it both ways. And I think that facing everything we've faced in the last 2 years is we're learning that we have to pay for the things that we get, and that we have to choose very carefully about what we put our money into. And is it the best effect in the long run for us?
Scott, well said. I have one more thing that I got to share with you quick about, I think, a reason for increase in hope. You want to hear it?
Yeah, lay it on me, buddy.
All right, here it is. I think because, going to things like that were commonplace before, sporting events, concerts, those kind of events, just way more challenging. That's our reality, right? So what that's going to lead to is a more of a renaissance of creativity, personal creativity, where people stay home or with a smaller, tighter group, do make music or do art or dance so I think this is what's going to happen. And the big mega events that are, blah, 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 I think they're going to be, I think they're going to go away.
It's on my list. Even big companies like Netflix are realizing that the lower budget, smaller produced, maybe better writing, maybe some new acting talent involved instead of the big names. And so they're back to producing mini series and short runs. And like you say, more about the craft than the budget. Maybe the special effects won't be
right. And that's a good example. I'm also thinking on a personal level, that we're going to see more personal creators, right? That, so I don't know if this is a factor or not, that, like as an example, I would have thought that YouTube would have seen a home increasing in creators. I didn't. Hey, Google, has YouTube seen an increase in creators over the pandemic?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
That's okay, Google. Thanks for trying. Google doesn't know. She didn't understand. Okay.
But there have been new platforms created.
She says, I'll always try my best to help.
Here's what I found on the web.
Oh. How far is YouTube? How far is no? Thanks, Google.
Yeah, Google didn't get any better during the pandemic.
No, but you know what? I don't know if you know this, Scott. If you thank Google, sometimes what you'll say is, "Wow, it's true what they say about Canadians being polite." He said that with me 3 times. Google says respond that way. Yeah.
Nice.
So
mine just says, Scott, that's a stupid question. So.
Oh, you got sassy Google over at your place. So
yeah, either that or it's one of the ladies from the other room using a Google Voice. I have something.
That's probably it. All right, Scott, we should wrap this up. We're an hour in, my friend.
Yeah. So the end, that's nothing. The list is so full, right? So go out there and make your own list, right?
Exactly.
That's what we want to leave people with.
I feel more hopeful. You feel more hopeful, buddy?
Oh, you bet.
All right.
Yep.
Carry on bravely. We will see you next week.
Go with hope, my friend. Go with hope.